Good afternoon, everybody. I'll reintroduce myself because we have a few new folks here in attendance on ThinkBox, and we may have some new folks that are joining for Bianca's session today. My name is Michael Goldberg. I'm our Executive Director of the Veal Institute for Entrepreneurship here at Case Western Reserve University, and also I'm a professor at the Weatherhead School of Management, where I had the pleasure of having our next speaker in class, which is fun. We were just trying to remember which class and where she sat and what she said or what she didn't say, but it's all fuzzy, Bianca. It is great to welcome Bianca Smith back to campus. It has been a crazy year for her, which she'll share some of the journey with you from being very much behind the scenes, working her way up through the world of baseball to blowing up. I think it was when Billie Jean King tweeted about your job that I was like, oh my, this is a big deal. So it's awesome. I think, as many of you know, Bianca is the first female African-American coach in Major League Baseball, and it's been a great year. RJ Christie, who's a member of the baseball team, who's done some work himself in baseball, is going to be our student moderator. As we've been doing, we want to make sure that we get you guys, we don't want RJ to ask every question, so we want to make sure that we hear your questions. If you're here in ThinkBox, just let us know. If you're on Zoom, just put a question in the chat, and if you're on LinkedIn, just put it in the comment, and then we will feed them to RJ. So with that, Bianca, welcome back to Case Western Reserve, and over to you, RJ.
Perfect. Thank you. What's going on, guys? Like Professor said, I'm RJ Christie. I play baseball here, junior here. So I guess just to start, Bianca, would you like to tell us just a little bit about yourself, like day-to-day kind of things, what you do?
Sure, I'll try to keep it short. As most people know, I started as a minor league coach for the Boston Red Sox back in March of 2020, moved down to Florida. As of this past season, I was in charge of our outfielders. I was in charge of base running. I coached first base. I helped with our hitters, and I wrote game reports at the end of every game. So our day-to-day was different every day, and that's kind of the same. Pretty much we came in 5:30 in the morning, got ready for the day, had our staff meeting. Guys started hitting at 8:30, and then from 8:30 to 11, it was hitting, defensive work, practicing base running, get lunch, play a game at noon, finish up hopefully 3 to 3:30, depending on how long the game was, and then spend the next hour or two working on game reports. And that's if we were home. Sometimes we had away games. Most of the time the rain would come in and suspend our game, and we'd end up having doubleheaders the next day. So it was, like I said, it was a variety, and at the same time it was kind of the same thing every day. But that's what I've been doing for the last season. And then glad to be back, and I'll be heading back down to Florida for our instructional league in a few weeks.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So I know that you coached here for a little bit. You coached at other colleges, university. How has coaching in college really helped you with your role with the Red Sox and everything?
Coaching college, I mean, right now with the most recent job I've had, like where I'm at is with the rookie level. I'm with the guys who are 18 to 22, 23 years old. And that's the same age as the college guys that I'm used to coaching. So I'm familiar with the fact that a lot of these guys, it's the first time they were away from home, the first time they have to do things on their own. This is also the first time where they are not the best athlete. They're used to being recruited and being some of the best athletes at their school. That's why they got to the next level. They're no longer just the best. They're facing the best. So a lot of it is also the mental side, making sure that they're not getting discouraged just because they might have a lot of, and I say a lot of bad at-bats because it's going to happen. But that's part of, getting past it. That's part of the game is, learning from that failure, not letting that failure define your career. So I think having that experience working with guys that are very similar in that same age, that same mentality, that same maturity has really helped me.
So it seems like, being that college players, 18, 22 in that area, it was an easy transition, you would say, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, easy transition. So when you got there, what was kind of like the biggest wake-up call that you had there, that was drastically different from college?
the schedule. that was, I mean, I don't think it's what people expect, but that was the biggest difference. I mean, when you're at college, NCAA restricts how much time you have with players. So we really have to figure out, okay, how are we going to get the most out of this time we have in those like few hours that we get a day? Whereas the professional level, we're with them 10 to 12 hours in a day. And if guys want to continue working after practice, we can do that. They can say, hey, can I get some more swings in the cage? Hey, can you throw to me some more? And we can say, yeah, sure, we'll do that. I mean, it's happened multiple times where instead of us going to lunch before the game, guys want to work on something quickly. So we'll be in the cage instead for those 15 minutes working with them. So I think that's been the biggest difference is just knowing, I mean, we don't have to force everything into, a couple of hours. Other than that, I think the other biggest difference is, I'll admit, the talent is, it's different. I mean, the things I have to work with college guys, depending on the level, is going to be different with what I have to work on guys who are being drafted for professional league. I mean, there's some things that are common, but at the professional level, it's more like little tweaks. I mean, by the time they get there, they kind of already have it. A lot of it's more going to be on the mental side. Whereas there's a lot more work to do with, college guys coming out of high school. So I think that's been a pretty big difference too.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. Kind of to transition into like technology and everything, specifically technology in sports and technology in baseball, kind of what you do every day. How do you think that the technology is changing everything? Like, I know that here at school we use things like blast motion, Rapsodo, to track our swings, type of pitches the pitchers are throwing, that kind of stuff. Can you go into a little depth, like what you guys use and how you guys use it?
I'll admit I can't go into specific detail. Pretty sure the Red Sox wouldn't want me spilling trade secrets. But I am familiar with blast motion. I am familiar with Rapsodo. I mean, everybody knows teams use Hit Track, TrackMan. MLB teams now have Hawkeye. We haven't gotten that at the minor league system yet, but I can bet that it's going to trickle down a little bit. Even some of the pitching machines we use are different. We've got, I think I can't say this, but we've got a black box machine that, I mean, we can randomize it. Guys hate it. Absolutely hate it, and that's because they're whiffing on some of these pitches. I'm like, this is what you're going to see in a game. This is why we do this, is to make you fail and you figure out how to adjust. So I mean, that's really, that's how we're kind of using that same technology the same way that colleges do. With the blast motion, we are using that to kind of be more precise about what we're trying to work with players. We use that with the video to make sure, I mean, the things that we're seeing with the blast numbers are actually what we think we're seeing just with a regular swing. I know I've also used blast motion kind of to look at, injury prevention. If I see a player who his bat speed, increases or drops by 10 miles per hour over a course of a week, something's wrong. Like, you're either compensating because something might be hurt, or you did something that I probably don't want you to do. Or just in general, like, I've had guys come in who are incredibly sore after lifting too much because they weren't ready for the new season. And of course, they're not going to tell the coaches, hey, we're sore. But I can tell now because you just went from 72 miles per hour to 60 with your bat speed. So we got to change our practice plan for the day, because it's not going to do anything to continue on the path we thought we were going to do if it's just going to hurt you. So we kind of use the same things. But really, it's just be more concise with our player development. So we're not wasting time trying to figure out this is what we need to work on. Now we kind of know for sure, this is our confirmation that what we're seeing is really what we need to work on.
So kind of in regards to like the technology and everything with the players, how do they respond to it? Do they enjoy it? Do they feel that sometimes it's too much, too little, like they want to use more? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so each player is going to be different. We've had players who they love the technology. They want to use it more. They want to know more information. We have players who they don't care what their numbers are. All they want to do is see that progress. They just want to get better. So our job is to not only learn which players are which, just figuring out how to give the information that we think they need without overwhelming them. Because there are some players who they want all of that information, but it is overwhelming. They're thinking about it too much when they're actually in the game, and that's, of course, not what we want to happen. So, like I said, it's a mix of players. There's going to be some who, particularly the college guys, they come in used to this technology. They've already used it at their school. High school guys, some guys do, some guys don't. It hasn't quite trickled down to a lot of high schools yet. So some high school guys come in and they have no idea about any of this tech. They've heard about it, but they've never used it, and they're still kind of on the fence. And then we have our Latin American guys. Some guys use it. If they're coming up through our academy, they're using it because all of our teams do. But they might come from another team that hasn't used it yet at the academy, so they're kind of new to it too. So it's a big mix of whether guys are familiar with it or not.
So I know even now there's a whole nother side of technology with like the data analytics, that kind of stuff that doesn't even focus really like with the hit track, Rapsoda, that kind of stuff. So is it a big part with your role down there as well, like in the minor leagues in regards to like shifting, knowing how the field hitters hit, like knowing what pitch to throw, that kind of stuff? Is that you use data analytics to look at things like that?
Specifically at my level, the rookie level, not as much, but that's mainly because we don't have that information yet. This is the first time we're seeing a lot of guys play. As they move up, yes. I mean, we have, that's what the positioning cards that you see major leaguers use. We're getting all that information from data analytics, from just seeing what guys have done in the past. And it's not just the major leaguers who are using it. We use the same process for every team. So by the time they get to the majors, they're used to this. They've already done it before. So gradually, they start to get used to using that information too for positioning, for the shift. At the rookie level, it's first couple of games, it's just on us coaches, just to kind of see somebody swing. And just from their swing, we can tell whether they're going to be early, whether they're going to pull, whether they're going to go oppo. And then eventually, we start developing our own spray charts as well and figuring out. I mean, we also explain it to the players, like this is how we're getting their information, so we can work on defensive positioning.
So in regards to all that as well, like data analytics, how does this help with like the draft processing and bringing in these high school guys, these college guys? Is that a big part of it as well, like when you're looking to draft players and everything like that?
This is going to be complete speculation because I have nothing to do with the draft. At least from what I've heard, not just from Red Sox, but just Major League Baseball in general, teams are starting to use it more. And that's unfortunately why some teams are getting rid of their scouts, is because they are relying on just the numbers that colleges provide. They're relying on the numbers from perfect game, PVR, I mean, all of the, you've got all of these companies who are getting all of these numbers for teams instead. So I think it's changing the game where that is starting to become, that is starting to impact the draft in some ways. I can certainly see teams who might see a guy's exit velo and kind of draft based on that. It's like, this is his power potential, even if he has high swing and miss. I mean, I've seen teams draft guys like that. And we'll see if it's a good or bad thing in the future. Right now, I think it's still kind of new, using the numbers a lot to help with the draft, but I think it is going that way.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point, saying how, like, a lot of teams are kind of getting away from the whole scouting processing and just using straight technology. So that kind of brings up the question, do you think there's a such thing as using too much technology within the sport? And because, I mean, it's everywhere, right? Like, and it's going to be forever evolving, forever changing. So do you think there's a such thing as using it too much?
A lot of people aren't going to like this answer, but yes. I think it's how you use technology that really matters. And you'll hear, there's such a thing as too much information. And that I don't necessarily believe in. I think you should gather as much information as you can if you know how to use it and when to use it. Just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it. And that's the key, I think. That's the balance that teams are still figuring it out, is, okay, how much information do we need? And which information should we actually use at this point? And right now, teams are kind of still in that place where they're just gathering as much as they can, putting it all together, and not quite picking and choosing, okay, this is what we need right now. And that's why it gets overwhelming for players too, because there's some teams where they don't give them any information, and then there's some teams that give them all the information. And again, we need kind of that balance of what information do they actually need and what can be useful right now.
Thank you for that. I think we have a question.
We have a Zoom question, and it's from a friend of yours. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, Bianca. Wish I was there with you guys in person. Is there something that we are not tracking in baseball today? Is there something that you would like to see developed where we could make another gain in understanding what's going on with a player? So is there a device that you could see developed by an entrepreneur maybe that would provide a really good insight that we currently don't have?
That is a really good question. I'm not sure if it's a device that would actually track it, but one thing I can say I've done in the past, and I've said this before, swing decision. I mean, it doesn't matter how great your swing is if you can't actually hit the ball and if you're not going to do damage with it. So knowing when to swing at what pitch, also based on pitcher, I think is pretty important. There are going to be times where, yeah, you're going to have a bad swing and you're still going to get a hit. That's great. But if we can start to maximize those opportunities of, when hitters are actually swinging at the proper pitches, I think it's going to be really important. And we can take a look at, okay, if we've got a guy who, yeah, he's hitting well, but he's, when I say well, I mean like average, but he's also swinging at terrible pitches. My first thought process is, okay, do you not know your strengths? Can you not see the ball? There's some cases where guys just can't see it. They think they're swinging at good pitches and they're really not. And I've actually come across a lot of guys who have no idea what pitch they're actually good at, which kind of blows my mind. I've asked them, okay, what's your weakness? And they're like, I have no idea. I'm like, well, you should probably know that, because if that's the first pitch you see, that's your bad pitch, and you're swinging at it, you're not going to do much, or you're just going to whiff, and that's kind of a wasted swing. So, I mean, that kind of stuff I'd love to see a little bit more at. It's like more the mental side, and it's kind of hard to develop a piece of technology that looks more at the mental side of the game. But I think we're starting to get to there. Right now, we've got so much that looks at the physical part, but that's such a small part of this game. By the time they get to the majors, they got the physical part down, but you still see guys striking out a lot. And why is that? It's because it's going to be more mental now.
Thank you. I think we have a question here in the audience.
Hey, Bianca. My name is Eddie. I'm an alum here. So Major League Baseball implemented a lot of different rule changes at the minor league level. How has that impacted you guys in player development? Has it made it more difficult or easier?
Some rules are easier, some rules are harder. Thankfully, at the rookie level, we have not had to deal with any of those rules. The only one was the extra innings rule, which honestly kind of makes it a little bit easier, only because our games go 3.5 hours. So it's kind of nice not having to still be out there for even longer. I have talked to pitching coaches, so the pickoff rule, that's actually been harder than people think, because as a pitcher, you're taught this is how you pick off. This is what you can and can't do. And you've been doing that your entire life. And all of a sudden now, no, you can't do that anymore. I remember during spring training, there were several times, even during games, there were times where we were just kind of getting a warning from the umps. It was almost like a reminder, no, your pitcher can't do that, just because we got to make sure that they understand that once they actually get to their regular season. So I know that's been difficult on the pitching side. Now, on the base running side, that same rule kind of makes it easier, because now we're telling base runners, just keep track of how many times they try to pick you off. They picked you off twice, or they tried to pick you off twice, just go. It kind of sucks for the strategy part, but pitchers now have to they have to actually consciously think about this now. Whereas for base runners, now that's one more thing that's occupying a pitcher's mind, and you can take advantage of that. So like I said, there's some that are easier and some that make it easier on us and some that make it harder. It just depends on the rule and depends on what area you're in.
think we have another question here in the audience.
Great. And thank you so much for doing this, Bianca. So I wanted to ask you, our previous speaker, and I know you walked in towards the end of it, was around communications. Your focus is baseball, your focus is developing young talent, yet you were thrown into, because of the historic nature of your new job, a media whirlwind. I wonder if you could sort of share some of the insights of this sort of crazy 9-month journey on the communication side, because this is something that you probably weren't necessarily expecting. You get your dream job, but there's a communication piece. And then sort of secondly, as you work with young talent that are watching you go through this, then what insights do you have for others? I mean, hopefully this young talent at some point gets to a point in their career where they get to the big leagues and then they're facing reporters and all these things. So I'm curious, like, having been on the other side of this sort of media juggernaut that wanted to talk to you and get your insights, like, what then insights did you have to share with the young people that you're mentoring and coaching?
I will say this to start. The guys that I work with, I'm actually kind of surprised. None of them knew who I was coming in. I have no idea how, but there were guys who assumed I was 22 or 23 and had never coached before. So it kind of took me by surprise, and it wasn't until like halfway through the season. But I mean, as far as the communication goes, I really have to give props to the Sox, just because they've been great as far as making sure like I didn't get overwhelmed. People who know me, I hate interviews if I don't have to do them. I don't mind, public speaking, talking about the journey, answering questions, but just the general interview process is very nerve-wracking. And the Red Sox were really helpful as far as, making sure I didn't feel pressured to do every single interview. And just kind of taking control of that. And then I had a rule for myself, which the Red Sox were completely on board, was I didn't do any interviews during the season because my focus was my job. And that's what I wanted it to be. I made a couple of exceptions, alma mater, so of course, Case Western, I was willing to, of course, talk to. But otherwise, I waited until the season was done. And I think that was the best route to do, just because as somebody, again, who I never desired to be in the spotlight, it was nice to be able to just focus on baseball. It was like we were kind of in our bubble where that's all I got to do. As far as advice, I mean, just keep your head. It does get overwhelming. I avoid actually reading any of the articles or anything that goes out, or at least for a while. I think it was maybe a month or two before I read the first one, just because I was curious about what they wrote. And that's when I found out that somebody actually, oh no, it wasn't that. My sister actually sent me an article that had some misinformation, and it said I was born in Pennsylvania. And she looks at me, she sends it to me and goes, wow, they're really trying to push this. I didn't know you were born in Pennsylvania. Like, I didn't either. So, I mean, stuff like that, friends and family will send. But for the most part, I generally just try to avoid looking at it. And I think that helps too, is just once you're in that moment, yes, do the interview, answer the questions, just try not to get flustered. If anything, like, I think of it as kind of acting. You're somebody else just answering questions. And then once it's done, it's done. Don't worry about what they said. Don't worry about what they wrote. Go back to your job and just let it go. And I think that makes it a little bit easier. But I think teams are also starting to get to the point where we're doing media training for guys too, just so they get a little bit more comfortable about answering questions, especially, on-the-spot questions.
Great. And let me just follow up. There was a question, Rick, on Zoom. If you want to unmute and go ahead and introduce yourself and ask your question for Bianca.
Sure. Hi, I'm Rick Jennings. I'm a student and a staff member. And I was wondering, have you ever had a situation where a player is doing all the wrong things with like swing decisions and mechanics or training, but they're still getting good results? Like they're still reaching base, like everything feels good. And in that kind of situation, and it's working in the short term at least, but in that kind of situation, how do you handle correcting that, or can you?
I actually have seen that, and I've seen it a couple of times, even at the major league level. And I think the biggest thing is that's where communication is so important, and developing that trust with that player. Generally, I would just, I would talk to the player, tell them what they're doing, and kind of leave it up to them. I mean, one of the things that, I learned with the Red Sox is it's their career. It's the player's career. We can tell them as much as we want. They don't have to do it. So we can only do so much. Our job is, to give that information, and when they're ready to accept it, then we work with them. We can't force it on them. So that's kind of the same approach I would take is, tell them what I'm seeing, tell them any suggestions, and if they're happy with what they're doing short term and they think it's going to work, all right, you can keep doing it, and I'm going to wait until you fail, and then you come to me and ask, okay, now what should I do? And that's unfortunately been, sometimes it's worked out where, I've had players at the college level too who have done this, where they had their short-term success, and then all of a sudden they had this slump that they could not get out of, and they finally came up to me and asked, okay, what do I need to do? And then that's when they're ready to learn. But otherwise, you can't just force it on them. You kind of have to wait for them to be willing to listen.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. I think we got a question from the audience right here.
Hi, my name is Flynn. I'm on the baseball team as well with RJ and John. You said in one of your previous questions the phrase "do damage," and I love that phrase. I say it all the time in my head when I'm in the box. So I was wondering, how do you get people or like the players in your team that are way too overly aggressive or not aggressive enough to get kind of in that in a sweet spot so they can do damage at the optimal way? So they're not overswinging, but they're not lacking in their potential.
Yeah, again, this is communication. Just kind of explaining what I'm seeing, what I think is going to happen. I actually do have a player we were with that was with the Red Sox, just drafted this year, who likes to overswing. And I kind of had to talk to him about it, and he's like, well, this is what I've always done. It's worked. And you get to the point where eventually it's not going to work anymore. So if you have that relationship with your player where you can kind of talk to them and kind of pull them back, I actually have two players who do that, and I think about it. The first one wouldn't listen to me until he started to fail. And then he started to pull back, and he started to listen to me, and we started figuring out, for one with overswinging, first thing I'm looking at is deceleration. How do you stop your body? How do you stop your hips so you're not finishing towards, third base dugout? And then same thing on the opposite end. If there's someone who's not swinging hard enough, I've had a simple drill where all I do is put the ball on the tee and say, just swing as hard as you can. Don't worry about the result. Just swing as hard as you can, and then you kind of figure out, okay, this is what my this is what my strength is. This is how much power I actually have. Sometimes it's something as simple as that. And then as a coach, now that I've seen how hard they actually can swing, I can tell when they're pulling back, and I can kind of remind them, because sometimes you go back to what you're used to. So sometimes it's just a reminder. And then, like I said, I have a second player who was overswinging constantly too, but he was one who he took to me a little bit faster, so he was willing to listen. So that became just a constant reminder of, hey, control. Before he went up to bat, it was just control. He knew exactly what I meant. So coming up with that, that phrase too, where they just understand. So it's not going to be an instant thing. It's sometimes you have to be creative, but a lot of it is, for me, it's feel too. Players have to feel what their body can and can't do. Players, it helps when they can feel, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So that way, when I'm doing something wrong, I can make the adjustment on my own. I don't have to rely on my coach constantly to tell me what I need to fix. So it's creating those drills that get them to that point where they can feel, honestly, like both ends of the spectrum, and then slowly working your way back in. And then that's when you get to that optimal swing that you're looking for.
So I kind of want to take you back to when you found out that you got this job, made history and everything. I know I read a lot of things, articles, listen to podcasts, and I know different athletes, even when they find out they got traded or they signed a new deal, it's a lot through Twitter, and they didn't even realize until someone posts about it or their family member texts them about it. So can you talk about when you found out, the emotions going through your head, that kind of stuff?
So thankfully, the Red Sox didn't just post that they hired me, because that would have been a nightmare. But so part of what I was doing before I was with the Red Sox, I was an assistant baseball coach at a college, but I was also a private instructor for 9 to 18-year-olds. So I was actually in one of my lessons. Actually, it was in between lessons, thankfully. I had like an hour off. They texted me quickly, said, hey, do you have a minute to talk? I was like, yeah, give me 10 minutes. Called them back. And they just kind of started talking about, we loved what we heard during the interview. We know that you have, a couple of other teams who are interested. And we know this is what you're interested in. And like I've told people, I actually initially interviewed for a player development / scouting hybrid role. So I was kind of still expecting that. And they just came out and said, we'd like to offer you the 4th coach position in Fort Myers with our rookie team. And it took everything in me not to yell on the phone. I was already kind of panicking when they said, hey, we want to talk to you. I was like, I'm assuming that means they're offering me something, because otherwise they would just email me and say, no, we were going a different route. So heartbeat is I'm just pounding. I'm trying to keep calm and do all, casual. Oh, yeah, that's great. Coaching job, sure. What else do I need to know? And just try to get all the information. Despite what people might think, I didn't accept it right on the phone. My parents raised me to, take a couple days to calm down and think everything through. I knew I was going to accept it, but I didn't do it. And, we just talked a little bit, got more information. They're like, yeah, just let us know in a couple of days. As soon as I hung up, I walked back into the facility. I still had some 12-year-olds just still hitting. I walked back in the facility and just went, I'm going to Fort Myers. And they're like, what in the what? So they were actually the first ones who knew about the job. But I almost started crying. I was so happy, and then immediately called my sister, told her. She did the screaming for me. And then I made the decision not to tell my parents, actually. Yeah, I wanted to surprise them. My plan was, since the Red Sox weren't going to tell anybody until the end of January, that didn't work out, obviously. I was going to surprise them as a Christmas present and give them Red Sox hats, and they were going to have to figure it out because they didn't even know I was interviewing with the Red Sox. So it was going to be completely new. Until a few days later, I did a panel with Major League Baseball that kind of released the information to the industry, and one of our assistant GMs said, you might want to tell your parents, because if they find out and it's not through you, they're going to be mad. So then eventually I told my parents, but it was a surreal moment. I don't think I'll ever forget that.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Kind of to piggyback off that, like being there, being a part of history, did you feel like you had any added pressure like coming in initially, or were you just like, I've done this all my life, like now it's just trying to execute?
There was a little bit of pressure. I wanted to succeed. Because I also recognize just how important it is, the representation. I wanted to succeed just to show that, women can coach baseball. I've heard several times that I wouldn't be hired because of that. And of course, I wanted to prove people wrong. At the same time, this is something I had been doing for a while. I was pretty confident, and having the position I did, it was kind of nice actually not coming in as a hitting coach, which is what people expected because my last job was hitting coordinator. It was nice to be able to come in and not only learn the philosophy, kind of rely on the other hitting coaches, and work my way into a position where I was comfortable instructing hitters without consulting the hitting coaches first, but also being able to find where I provided the most value, which for me and for the Red Sox were working with our outfielders and working with base running. And thankfully that's something I'd always been passionate about. But I really found my place there, because there were times where I would talk to the manager and say, hey, I saw this during a game, and he said, I didn't even think about that. I was like, we should probably work on this with base running, and came up with a couple of drills, and our manager's like, I'm really glad you said that, because I definitely didn't notice that. So there was definitely a little bit of pressure. I'll say actually there's probably more pressure on the players I left, because then I kind of jokingly told them, now that I'm leaving, you guys have to, you actually have to do well, because everybody knows where I came from. So you better have a good season. Otherwise, you're going to make me look bad, which thankfully they did. But No, I think once I just reminded myself, it's just like any other coaching job I've taken. The only real pressure is that I want to help players get better. I don't want to make them worse.
That's awesome. Thank you. So, quick question. When coming up with drills and everything for practice, do you use a lot of, like you said, just straight from game, like you see something in the game and it's like, all right, we got to work on that? Or is it like watching film afterwards, the technology and everything? Like, how do you come up with these drills for each person and each player?
So for hitters, it's a mix of technology and video. Usually it's taking a look at, all right, this is what they're actually struggling with, especially if I have a chance to do individual sessions with them. If I know that one guy is struggling with his bat speed, or one guy is struggling with attack angle, I can coordinate the drill based on what they're actually struggling with. And then at the same time, when we have limited time with our hitters and we kind of have to have an overall team drill, I'll just kind of take a look at, okay, yeah, what did we struggle with in past games? And what is the most common problem between all of these guys that we can work on that doesn't really hurt, the guys that are already good at it. Defensively, it is, I usually have some kind of plan, like a weekly plan. Okay, this is what I want to work on each day. But that does change if I see something in a game where I say, okay, we really do need to work on that. So then I'll change the plan pretty easily. I mean, I've done that with, we had a game where we had 3 line drive singles, I think, land in front of our outfielders. Mm-hmm. So the very next day, I took a machine out there, and we worked on shoestring catches. Mm-hmm. And I actually just had to tell them, guys, if you dive and you're really putting in the effort, we're not going to be mad at you. We're not going to be upset. We're going to be more upset if you just let a ball drop in front of you and you could have probably caught it. So, and then that day, the game after that, we had 2 diving catches in the outfield. Hmm. So, I mean, yeah, seeing things like that, I mean, if I see something specific, I'm going to want to work on that immediately because it's also fresh in their minds. We can easily say, hey, yesterday's game, this is what we did. This is what we need to work on. And then if we haven't really seen anything, then we kind of have like our list of drills already that we just try not to do the same drill 2 days in a row. We try not to work on the same focus, 2 days in a row. We might do, glove work one day where it's just ground balls. We might do, working on, going through or running through the ball the next day. We might work on head turns the next day. So that's generally how I try to plan my drills, is they're going to be a little bit different each day, and then sometimes it's the same focus, but a slightly different drill that's a little bit more fun. So like we've done with outfield, we've actually worked on communication by juggling soccer balls between each other. And they just have to call the soccer ball, and if they miss, they're out. So it's also competition.
I think we got a question here from the audience.
Yeah, hi. My name's Brooke. I'm an undergraduate student here at Case, and I was wondering, just talking more on being the first female African-American coach in baseball, what advice you have for other women trying to enter the sports field and navigating just a male-dominated world, and like how you found your voice and your leadership role throughout all that.
One, ignore the critics. If it's constructive criticism, yes, take it, listen to it. You might not always agree with it, but at least consider it. Any other criticism is usually going to come from people who have no idea your background, no idea what you've done, and probably no idea of the industry either. Those are the people who are just kind of sitting around on their butts anyway. So why does it matter? Just don't even bother listening. Or in my case, like I use it as fuel sometimes. There have actually been times where I might be tired after a couple of weeks, and my fire is going through those negative comments and going, all right, I got this now, because now I want to prove these guys wrong. Other than that, I mean, as far as actually once you're in the industry, I've said this a couple of times, and I hate that it's kind of still this way, but women working with men, sometimes when you're first getting started off, they're usually not going to listen. Not very often. Some will, but a lot won't. So a lot of the times when you come up with an idea, you kind of have to let them think it was theirs, as long as stuff gets done. And then after a while, you get to that position of trust where they realize, okay, you actually do know what you're talking about. Because I've had this with players too, where you do know what you're talking about. and then you can start implementing a little bit more change. But one thing I've noticed with several female who come into the industry is they try to force change too quickly. And it's not just with women, it's anybody coming into an industry. You're not going to come into an organization and try to change everything. You have to learn the organization first. You have to find your spot, even if it means kind of stepping back and letting other people take credit for what you've done, because that still means the organization gets better. And eventually, like I said, you get to the point of trust where people will listen to you. And then you can start to implement gradual change. But otherwise, people they resist change when you force it on them, especially when you're a new person.
So to kind of piggyback off that, do you have like one moment in specific, like while you were coaching and people were kind of like pushing you off, not really following what you were telling them, and then everything kind of just clicked for them, like, oh, she does know what she's talking about? Like, do you have any type of stories about that or anything?
I feel like it's kind of every coaching position I've had. It's just coming in, again, not really forcing anything, but just talking the game, getting to know the players, and eventually, they figure out, not only do I understand the game, I actually do care about how they do, because that makes a difference too. And it's going to be with any industry you work in. People need to know that you truly do care. You're not just here to, put your name on something. I know professional athletes, that's a big concern, is coaches coming in and all they want to do is just be that one person who, I helped this major leaguer out. And then that's your claim to fame. That should never be, players should never feel that. They should feel like you're actually there to help them out. So like I said, pretty much every organization I come into, every team, it always starts with, okay, who is this person? Why is she here? And then eventually it becomes okay, she actually does know what she's talking about. So there's always that moment. You just have to be patient, and then it comes.
Thank you for that. So kind of just to wrap up here, we're running out of time. What would be some advice you give to people trying to get into the sports industry, into like the player development type role that you're in? Any advice, any recommendations you have for that kind of stuff?
One, network. First thing you can do, starting with just your school. Reach out to alumni who are in that industry that you're interested in. Those are going to be the ones who are more likely going to talk to you immediately. And then once you talk with them, do an informational interview. And then always follow up with, is there anybody else you think I should speak with? And then that's going to get them thinking, there's this one person who might be interested. Start to branch out your network. And then one thing that, unfortunately, a lot of people, you don't really learn until you've been trying to do this for a while with networking, it's not just the first email. It's continuing to keep in touch and genuinely wanting to know how people are doing. So I struggled with this when I first got started. I was terrible at networking. Now, Cincinnati Reds, it's been 2 years since I've been with them. And I still text the coaching staff. I still text the front office. I just emailed the GM a couple days ago, and we were talking about how his daughters are doing in school. Just to keep in touch, and also just to see how they're doing. And eventually it becomes that real relationship. You really want to know how they're doing. And then they do the same thing for you. And I found out later, I actually applied for a Reds coaching position too. And I found out later, after I got the Red Sox, that the manager of the Cincinnati Reds put in a good word for me for that position. Like, he wanted to help me out. And it makes a difference when you actually keep in touch with people. So that's a huge part of networking. Also, if it's specifically the sports industry and you're in school and you have time, work with that sport. It's amazing how many people don't take advantage of the athletics that they have on campus. That's what I did here. That's actually what drew me to Case Western, was my opportunity, the chance to really work with the baseball team. So do that if you have time. Even if it's, I can only come to practice a couple of times, but you learn so much more about the industry when you're really in the trenches, when you're at practices, when you're learning as much as you can about the game than you do just watching the game from the stands. So those are going to be the biggest ones. And then just don't give up. It's a lot of hard work. It's not easy. I've had one full one full-time job my entire life, and it was an assistant athletic director, and I didn't even want to do that. So it's going to take sacrifice. I had no social life. You can ask our head coach here. I really did have. It was baseball in school. That was it. So it is sacrifice, but it's completely worth it in the end if this is something you really want to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for all that, answering all our questions. I think we're out of time for today, but I'll pass it off to the professor and kind of wrap it up for us.
Great. RJ, great job moderating. You've got now that you're interested in a sports career, you could be a moderator. I mean, political debates, conversations with Bianca. Thank you for doing that. Bianca, well, thank you for coming back. It was great to see you. You've been really giving both, and you've done some speaking with us, I know with other classes on campus. We're so proud of your story. I mean, I think when this broke, and obviously the deep connection with the baseball team, it's great to see what you're doing. It's great to have you back here. I know you're off to practice after this with Coach Matt and these guys, so this is great. So let's give a round of applause for Bianca and RJ. Thank you for doing this.